Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is an investment guide to shared skills as of April 2021. It's been nearly a year since shared skills were introduced to Dragalia Lost, and several of you have left comments asking which shared skills I'd recommend unlocking first, so I wanted to make this video to help answer that question. Shared skills are unlocked by spending elemental tomes, and unlocking a shared skill requires that the adventurer whose skill is to be shared be at level 80 or above and at 50 mana nodes or more. An exception is made for adventurers recruited from the main campaign whose shared skills come pre-unlocked for free. The cost is steep, and elemental tomes aren't abundant, especially for free-to-play players and those who are newer to the game. At the time of recording, the F2P tome distribution stands at 37 flame tomes, 27 wind, 37 water, 40 light, and 57 shadow, with a handful more tomes available just to those players who unlocked a few bugged skills before they were fixed. As of now, all units can equip up to 10 points worth of shared skills, and each skill has a share cost of 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, which also indicates how many tomes it takes to unlock. Tomes are usually obtained in mid-month onslaught and defensive battle events, with a handful sprinkled in for clearing high difficulty content like Omega 3 raids and trial battles and facility events. Broadly speaking, I think there are 3 types of effects you'll want to look for in shared skills. First, defensive and survival effects that help with auto and solo play. Second, offensive and burst effects that help with co-op. And third, utility effects like Dispel, Extra Dragon Gauge, and more that serve a variety of purposes. When it comes to survival-oriented shared skills, staples include skills which buff defense and thereby trigger double buffs. Patya and Templar Hope's shared skills fall into this category. These adventurers are powerful on their own, so you already have an incentive to build them regardless of their shared skills, which isn't always the case. Their skills totally collapse in the Sinister Dominion due to Curse of Nihility, but they're safe choices when looking to set up auto battle teams for the Agito Uprising or Advanced Dragon Trials. It's often best to equip their skills onto support units because they may run skill haste dragons and carry extra buff time. Yuya and Valentine's Orion round out the popular defense buff shared skills, with theirs being slightly less common. Valentine's Orion gives a slightly smaller buff than Templar Hope and Patya, but his skill share cost is only 3, so it can slot in with 7 cost skills. Yuya's skill also has smaller strength and defense buffs, but grants a 1-use shield as well. This can help keep team members at maximum HP and has seen past use in time attack. It's also 1 extra buff icon thanks to the shield for when that's relevant. Sabella's shared skill also grants a 30% HP shield and does so at the lowest SP cost among shared skills. Sabella, Yuya, and Valentine's Orion aren't so great on their own though, so if you're investing, it's mainly just for their shared skills, or in Yuya's case for his co-abilities as well. For most players, the benefits probably won't justify the cost on these. Maximum HP buffs are rarer than defensive buffs, but can be quite coveted for auto battle. These include Sanoa for the team, who's random but generally works in longer fights, or Cassandra, who works for the elite adventurer only. In particular, Shadow doesn't have access to HP up on their healers normally, so this effect pairs well with Grace, although neither Sanoa nor Cassandra are especially strong adventurers on their own. You don't see these skills too often except in high-end auto battles that are usually harder in difficulty to pull off. Maximum HP buffs are unaffected by Curse of Nihility though, so their use may rise going forward. Another set of shared skills used for survival purposes are those which reduce enemy strength. Mine and Joker are standouts in this category. Mine's skill has a low share cost and lowers enemy strength by 20% for 15 seconds. Joker's has a higher cost and lowers enemy strength by 15% for 20 seconds. Shadow tomes are plentiful and not much besides Patya is a must-have, so Joker is a pretty safe pickup, especially since he's a strong adventurer with a unique co-ability who you'll already want to invest in. Mine requires slightly more justification, but I think her shared skill is better overall, and her combo time chain co-ability is unique to her. As for when you'll want to use enemy strength reduction, well, it can come in handy for auto battle, and importantly, it's unaffected by Curse of Nihility. Burst and regen healing skills aren't as prevalent, but they do come up from time to time. Halloween Lowen is a standout thanks to his ability to trigger double buffs. This interaction is especially favorable in auto teams which include Grace. Estelle offers the best rate as far as the amount of healing per SP cost. She's good against Lilith, and so is her shared skill if you're struggling during the second phase of Master. Outside of these two healing shared skills, I feel like in a lot of cases the free skill from Cleo is sufficient. Many other healing shared skills exist which can help cleanse afflictions, and those can be fine as well. I just don't put as high of a priority on healing shared skills, nor most damage dealing ones, because the potency of shared skills is diminished. Heals are reduced to 50% of their original value, and damage is reduced to 70%, not counting afflictions. This is why buffs and utility effects are often the strongest shared skills. A few skills cross categories, so I'll briefly mention their use case in a survival context. Dispel is a big one against bosses who increase their strength like Lilith and Volk. We'll delve more into Dispel later in the video, but suffice to say it does have a major role to play in both offense and defense depending on the boss. Overdamage is another effect that is generally used for added damage, but it does come with some minor healing. Skills which cause afflictions like Stun and Freeze can also improve survival odds against dangerous boss mechanics, and they're particularly useful against the Yaha and the Toha to prevent them from ramping up strength buffs. This use case, among others, makes Lily and Dragalia Cleo, whose shared skills cause freeze, pretty valuable to unlock. Although they can be used on offense to debilitate an enemy, I feel like their shared skills are more important in survival setups. Freezing Ayaha and Toha in auto and solo play, or canceling Volk's snapping squalls in co-op works great. Other less common skills can help with survival and sustain too, such as the lifesteal buff unique to Yue. Moving on to burst and offense, I tend to think of this category as more suitable for co-op in part because it's pretty rare to set up explosive strategies in solo play. Having said that, some of the survival shared skills we already talked about bleed into this category as well. Patya and Templar Hope in particular are often used for double buff cheese clears featuring Veronica, Karina, and Mitsuba alongside Feline Hospitality. That's not really an option in newer Curse of Nihility content, but some of the same staples for burst do work. Xia Wujing's shared skill is a standout here as one that's effective across a variety of different quests. It works well on raid bosses in the Agito Uprising and versus the Sinister Dominion, especially if you make the effort to overlap your defense debuff zone with another player's, particularly during break. Xia Wujing himself isn't all that good, unfortunately, but he can find a home in expert auto comps for Lilith depending on who else is in your collection. I still think his shared skill is worth picking up regardless. The closest shared skill to Xia Wujing's is probably Seime's. It also deals damage, causes Scorch Rend, and dispels, but the SP cost is quite high. Too high for this to be the sole dispel source for certain quests, yet the total package makes up for it. Seime's unique co-ability and chain co-ability combo means he's probably worth building anyway, so this is another shared skill I can see investing in at minimal extra cost. Besides defense down, another way to burst is to energize the team, so Summer Norwin's share can be worth considering for that purpose. Unfortunately, this won't work all that well against Curse of Nihility. Other shared skills will sometimes tack on a small amount of defense reduction, but it usually isn't worth it unless the skill has other desirable effects, like Renee, who can cause Bog, or Raymond, who can stun. Even so, these shared skills tend to be more niche, and the defense down isn't the main draw to the skill, plus they're on adventurers who it's hard to justify investing in. They aren't ones I would prioritize highly, and it's pretty rare to see them used in general co-op gameplay. I would say the same holds of other Bog-inducing skills like Summer Julietta's and Summer Celiera's. They are pretty niche since Bog doesn't work against all bosses, so they're not a super high priority, even if they can excel in well-coordinated teams and speedruns. The main thing they have going for them is actually an auto comps of Master Ayaha and Toha, where timeouts can be a problem when running with multiple gold Fafnirs. In that case, Bog can be very helpful, and I suppose Summer Julietta's shared skill also has great damage mods for its SP cost, which is something. Whereas defense reduction is best for a flurry of damage during break, overdamage works well for consistent damage over time. Yukata Cassandra and Dragalia Lily provide this buff, which scales off the user's strength stat. Lily comes with a team strength buff, but her skill costs more SP to use, generally making it worse when faced with Curse of Nihility, but better otherwise. Overdamage can be extended with buff time, and it's excellent for dealing lots of hits at once, making it handy in quests where a high hit count is necessary, like Thor's Trial and Trials of the Mighty. It's also just very solid damage over time. Notably, though, overdamage doesn't stack, so only one member of the team should use it in co-op play. If an attacker uses it, you're likely to have a better damage tick, but if a healer brings it, it'll likely last longer since their builds more commonly feature extra buff time via Worm Prints. Both options are reasonable. I think overdamage is a pretty nice effect to unlock, but it's less common since it's only found on 2 5-stars, one of whom is limited. Whereas I'd suggest having both Patya and Templar Hope unlocked. For overdamage, I think just one should do. Another pair of shared skills that are frequently used to boost damage in co-op are Xander's and Karina's. I don't generally recommend pure damage dealing shared skills, but these scale in power based on the number of buffs the user has, allowing them to shine on adventurers like Ezlith who accumulate buffs rapidly. Of course, Curse of Nihility is a big downside here, but these skills are still worth unlocking in my view, and at a minimum I would go for Karina's since she's such a core unit for many Agito and easier quests that you'll probably want to have her built anyway. As an added bonus, both of these skills cause Frostbite at a relatively low SP cost, which is an effective secondary affliction against most Agito bosses. Adventurers like Chirota and Pinon have better rates on non-buffed damage and Frostbite uptime, but it's tough to justify double dipping when Karina and Xander aren't that much worse as Frostbite enablers, yet still serve as strong nukes. A stronger choice in many cases, if you wish to enable a secondary affliction, is Formal Joaquim, whose shared skill causes poison for 30 seconds and Storm Lash for 21. His shared skill is the single best enabler for double Punisher strategies because it's the only one whose poison affliction lasts for half a minute instead of 15 seconds. Not all bosses can be poisoned, but together with Frostbite, that should cover most of the endgame. I would also suggest one of Ilya, Rizarda, or Irene as a good flash burn source if you have one of them to unlock. Ilya has a share cost of 6, but the lowest SP cost among the skills. Rizarda is in the middle at 5, and Irene only costs 4 to share. Outside of Xander and Karina, the damage dealing shared skill I like the most is Veronica. She's not an essential pick at all, but with Shadow Tomes being fairly common, she's not much of a splurge to obtain. Her damage mods are just really high when the enemy is poisoned and the user is at low HP, which, to be fair, isn't going to be too easy for most adventurers to maintain. I think for most players, something like Ronzel's shared skill, which is totally free and causes poison and dispels after Ronzel's mana spiral, is going to work just fine when a powerful damage dealing shared skill is needed. With a shared cost of only 3, Ronzel packs a high amount of damage and brings the utility of Dispel, albeit at a high SP cost. Another option for damage dealing adventurers as well as many buff bots is to use Summer Cleo's shared skill. After her mana spiral, this has the rare property that when used within a group of allies, it readies the user's first skill for immediate use and grants them a number of minor buffs. Readying the user's first skill immediately is nice because that won't suffer from reduced potency in the way that damage dealing shared skills do. This is commonly used in cheese strategies involving Gala Mim and Karina. Another use is on buff bots where their first skill is usually a buff and they don't want to take much time off from buffing by casting shared skills. Summer Cleo's skill lets them fit extra buffs into their rotations. Outside of the shadow element where the Agito weapon skill comes with extra attack rates, it's also pretty common to see buff bots forgo their own Agito skills in co-op to use extra personal attack rate buff skills like those of Mikoto or Summer Luca. The idea behind this is that it means the buff bots are casting their primary skill, typically a buff, faster and thereby more often. This tends to be unique to buff bots because it's rare that DPS units will forego their Agito skill, with Curse of Nihility being the exception. Against Curse of Nihility, DPS units tend to prefer to run 2 damage dealing skills or utility skills like debuffs that still work, and buff bots can't really function with the exception of amp users and select units like Kimono Elisam. And speaking of utility, well, that brings us to the last set of shared skills I want to discuss in this video. These are the shared skills which provide special and sometimes unique effects that make them handy on both offense and defense depending on the scenario. Dispel is a big one here since several bosses ramp up buffs, either strength or defense. As mentioned earlier, the strength buffs of Volk and Lilith mean you'll want Dispel just to live. But against other bosses like Ciela and Kai Yan, Dispel is necessary to mount an effective offense too, as without it you'll stall out against their defensive buffs and shields respectively. When it comes to Dispel, due to how boss buffs often come bundled in batches of 2 or 3, low SP cost is often the most important attribute. In this capacity, Lapis is unmatched, as her shared skill dispels and costs less than 6,000 SP to fully charge. If you're missing Lapis, Galenot is the next best dispel option. Her shared skill costs a little over 8,000 SP to fully charge, and as an added bonus, it deals 30 hits, one of the highest counts of any shared skill. If you don't have either of these adventurers, your next best options for Dispel are Dragalia Victor and Nadine. Victor is good in part because of how widespread Shadow Tomes are, and Nadine is particularly good on ranged units since they'll cast her skill at range, which can be a problem with Dispel skills like Ronzal's. If you don't have either of them, you'll want to look at Naveed next, after which the SP costs start to really grow. A core problem here is that besides Ronzal, Dispel shared skills are all on 5-star adventurers, so you may have to use whoever you have access to for a while. Many players ran into this as a roadblock when they were taking on the master difficulty of Lilith. Another set of utility skills you'll want in your toolkit are those that work with Dragon Transformation. At this point, there are many adventurers who benefit from shapeshifting, and they often enjoy skills which allow them to fill up their Dragon Gauge faster. Yuden's shared skill is free, has a share cost of 3, deals damage, burns, and grants 3% Dragon Gauge after his mana spiral. Gala Mim's shared skill increases user strength by 20% for 10 seconds, deals okay damage, and grants 5% Dragon Gauge at a slightly higher SP cost and a share cost of 4. And most recently, Humanoid Mercury's shared skill has the lowest SP cost among these 3 options, deals solid damage and causes frostbite, and grants 5% Dragon Gauge. Both Mim and Mercury are strong on dragon-centric characters, with Yuden serving as a decent free-to-play backup option. Another shared skill which enhances dragons is Gala Lucas. Just by having it equipped, the user's skills while in dragon form get 10% extra critical rate for each unique buff icon applied to the user. It's not amazing, but it has a few uses and is one of the only shared skills that does anything at all in Onslaught events. The last few skills are a mix which, much like the dragon ramping skills, work best on adventurers within a certain niche. Hunter Cerise's shared skill increases the damage of the user's next Force Strike. This is good if you enjoy playing adventurers who deal lots of damage through single, powerful Force Strikes like Ilya and Gala Zena. Yue and Durant both lower user defense but provide powerful buffs. These assist units who want to take damage in order to hit a low HP threshold. Since Yue provides healing as well, she's not as suited to staying at low HP though, but she can be a pretty good source of healing. Valentine's Chelsea, similarly, burns the user, deals damage, and causes Stormlash. Self-burn is a niche effect, but coupled with damage and Stormlash uptime, it works on adventurers who want to stay at a low HP. And, well, I think that just about covers what I consider to be the best shared skills in Dragalia Lost. We covered 3 broad categories of skills: 1, defense and survival, 2, burst and damage, and 3, utility effects. My general opinion is that defense and survival skills like Patya's and Templar Hopes should be prioritized first to help break into auto battles of endgame content, while more offensive skills can wait since co-op tends to have a lot of flexibility as to what works outside of the hardest hardest endgame quests. Dispel is the other key thing to pick up early, since some bosses are very tough to beat without it. That means Ronzel is a good early investment for his mana spiral, and cheap Dispel from 5-star units is a welcome upgrade when you summon them. Once you have those basics covered, then stuff like Double Affliction Punisher and Defense Down can be your next pickups. The most niche shared skills, however unique, should probably be saved for last. There's definitely overlap across all three categories, and I'm sure there are some strong skills I've left unmentioned. So I'd like to close this guide by turning to all of you. What do you think about shared skills in Dragalia Lost? Have you unlocked most of the ones I talked about today? Were there any major skills I missed? Or are there any you just love to use? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, everyone, thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.